Hope everybody is doing well. It's time for another online dinner party. I've got one guest, and we'll see if others show up as well. But I hope everybody is doing well on this particular Wednesday. You know, we do these online dinner parties every Wednesday, have great conversations, learn from each other, and see what's going on in the world. I know that yesterday I had the pleasure of being there to an accept award for the Cultural Arts Center that I work for, the Hayti Heritage Center, and we got an award from the Preservation Society for some of the historical work that we're doing to honor the Black Wall Street community as well as what they're doing as a cultural arts center that is now 50 years in existence because it started off as a historical African American church, the St. Joseph's Church, which still exists but has moved to a different location because of urban renewal and all along those lines. But we are still the people that are keeping the history going and all along those lines. So we were glad that the Preservation Society honored us along with honoring John Slepp, if I remember his name correctly, and Andre Van, the archivist for North Carolina Central University, and the Gear Street Cemetery people, and DTW Architects, and a number of other folks that are doing different things in the space of preservation and all along those lines. So it was definitely good to be at that event that was about 2 hours long at the Re-City location and everything like that. So that was a fun activity that I got to attend on yesterday and everything like that. Also heard from Heather Cherty, who will be a guest on one of these dinner parties, who has got the flying cars and all along those lines. So I think she'll be joining us next week. She said her and her dad, who's in his 80s, are like the modern day version of the Jetsons, if you remember that TV series, and all along those lines. So they'll be joining us on the 26th and everything like that. But a lot's going on in the world, and I'll be glad to have Miss Doreen Mary come in, Doreen Mary Bray, and learn about she's gone on as a shaman and all along those lines. And I hope that maybe she could even help me find some better luck with my fantasy football team and everything like that, even though I know that that is necessarily what goes on in the energy space. But I took another loss, and my team will be heading to the Sucker Bowl, it looks like, because I don't think I've got any chance of making it to the regular playoffs. But then again, I'm a big Minnesota Vikings fan, and they've been suffering as well. So I don't think that they've got a good chance of making it to the actual playoffs, but they still got time because they were only another several games to go in that space. So maybe they'll fool me and make it to the playoffs and make some noise and all along those lines. I hope they do better than my Milwaukee Brewers did, who made it to the playoffs and then lost to the eventual champions, the Los Angeles Dodgers, and all in that space. But the Dodgers had to go 7 games. And then there are other folks who are following the sports around here because I'm over here by Duke. And of course, people are expecting maybe even Duke to be a number 1 seed after the latest polls come out and all along those lines. I know I've also stepped outside a couple of times, and the weather is lovely. I'm not convinced that Turkey Day is about 8 days from now because it feels almost like summer weather out there or spring weather. I'm not sure how it feels where Doreen is, but I'm gonna bring her in and see how the weather is treating her and all along those lines. But we're having some very unseasonable weather here. I think it's been like in the 70s, even though in the evening time when it gets darker earlier because of daylight savings time and everything like that, it has definitely been some chillier weather at nighttime. But in the daytime, it's been like around the 60s or 70s and very pleasant outside. So I stepped outside for a few times. After this show, I might even get my bird app and hear what birds are in the community because I use Merlin and everything like that, and hear what birds are in the community while walking around the neighborhood and all along those lines. Because I've been surprised by some of the birds, like the grand heron that is here. But as my dad pointed out to me, Duke Gardens, which is also here in Durham, has a nice pond, so the herons may be attracted to the fish in the pond and everything like that. So, how are you doing, Miss Doreen? Was glad to reach out to you and learn more about what you got going on in your world.
Excellent. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, no problem at all. So I know that you've definitely got a lot going on and you've definitely been involved in a lot of things. And part of that is ways that we can get our energy better and all in that space. And I've got some friends that are in the energy space as well. And sometimes we are having folks that are going through bullying, going through depression, and doing stuff like that. So, what are some of the ways that you get people out of these negative energy spaces? Because I know the pandemics, they say it's over and it's been over now for a few years, even though COVID is still out there and everything like that. But I was just wondering, how do you get people to live in a positive environment, particularly when we're constantly berated and hit with all the negative news of the world?
That's a really good question. for myself, I look at people as individuals. So, everybody has their own programming, their own way of thinking about reality and dealing with reality. So I feel that an individual approach a lot of the time is necessary. But overall, sometimes it's just taking a deep breath, stopping,
Mhm.
smiling. Just the fact, just smiling can change a person's hormone balance, their whole chemical makeup. I smile, I feel better instantly. So sometimes it can be really simple things.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sometimes it's just the simple things in life. Like I said, I sometimes enjoy going out for a nature walk. I might see the birds. I might see some of the other things that are out there. And too often we don't do enough of the regular things that are able to give us joy. There is a pond not that far from here. I guess it would be considered a pond if you're going to go by different styles of body of water because it's not as big as a lake and it's definitely not a stream and everything like that. And I know that I used to maybe a year or two ago enjoy walking around that, but even stumbled across some turtles and some other animals that were there as well. But I was just wondering, how much does nature play in your own life in the way that you use it to ground yourself?
I couldn't imagine a world without nature. Nature is in full oneness. One energy flows into the other. Tree roots touch each other, hug each other. It's an interconnectedness. Branches of a tree hold lizards and insects and birds, and there's this whole communion within it. And that's just the energy of a tree. When we look at nature whole, there's this synchronistic energy that moves through it. And if we're breathing, and if we're aware and awake enough to respond to it, it can also flow through us. That to me is ultimate healing.
No, that makes sense. And I'm glad you said that. What do you say to people that ask whether animals and trees have souls? Because I know that I've had that conversation. I consider myself more spiritual than religious and everything, but I sometimes wonder about that even when, as a youngster, I remember seeing trees that had been cut and people would count the circles to see how long the tree had lived and everything like that. But even sometimes me as a empathetic person would sometimes wonder how the tree was feeling after it had been uh, kind of like destroyed in that sense and everything. So I just wanted your thoughts around both animals and plants having souls and whether that is something that you believe in or your thoughts around that.
Everything that exists has consciousness. Consciousness is soul. I have past life memories, and I actually remember being a tree.
Hmm.
Uh, it's one of the most powerful experiences anyone can have because there's this silence where you're the observer, you're holding communion with everything around you. As a tree, you know each person that walks by you each day by their energy. So the essence of a tree is in my mind, the whole grounding network of reality where energy comes down through the trees, rooted into the earth, and this cycle then is what helps hold earth into this energy field that we call home.
Yeah, we definitely call this energy field home, and I'm interested in how you say that and everything because I sometimes think that people don't give enough credit to the animal kingdom because I know sometimes there's a lot of people that believe that mankind is the top of the chain when it comes to the uh, not just the food chain, but in the hierarchy of animal life and everything like that. But I, for one, know that there are some very smart cats because I used to have some cats, or actually maybe they owned me since there's the whole notion of whether cats own you or you own cats and whether dogs are more obedient and all along those lines. But I just wondering your thoughts as to maybe humans, because we've doing all kinds of crazy stuff in the world these days, aren't the smart ones and everything like that. That the porpoises or the dolphins and even maybe some animals that we don't like the roaches and some of the rats and everything may be smarter than us. But as a person that is a shaman and a shaman, I should say, and everything like that. But what is your take on us as part of the animal kingdom? Because I know a lot of people are always thinking that humans are the top of the chain.
We are animals, and I believe we were born on this planet to be caretakers of the animals and nature, the trees and forests, in particular. Uh, so I believe that humans have stepped outside of their true purpose. They are not practical in the sense that they're working on programs as opposed to essence and their ultimate purpose. I have a dog and a cat. They both dream. My dog will be asleep and she's like, running and woof woof and and in order to dream, you have to have consciousness.
Right.
You have to have memory, right?
Yeah.
So of course there's sentient beings. Everything again in my mind, everything on this planet is a sentient being, even down to the worm. They say that if we removed all the worms on this planet, the entire planet would die. If we removed humans, the planet would thrive.
Yeah, the interesting part is, like they said, we removed the worms, the planet would die. We removed some of the other things, the planet would die. But if we got rid of all the humans, the world would still go on with the other animals doing what they do and everything like that. I mentioned the Hayti Heritage Center. It's a cultural arts center, but it's an old building. It was built in 1891 and everything like that, even though it was originally created as a brush arbor, which means that they were just having the property and having church service outside as way back as 1869 and everything like that. But one of the things that we talk about is that a lot of people have gone through that building. I don't know a person that hasn't worked in that building, that hasn't heard dance steps, because there have been people that have danced there, that have moved on in life and everything like that, or that has not heard other mysterious things that have happened in that very historical building that has lost some great ancestors. Because I'm a big believer in ancestral connections. As a matter of fact, my grandmother, who created the uh, African American Library in Raleigh, was just recently honored, and an award was named after her recently, even though she did that back in the early decades and everything like that. But definitely, she has been honored, and they named an award after her recently, and all along those lines. So I was definitely proud of my grandmother and the works that she has done and everything. But the reason I'm asking about this is because I know that you have had some connections with dealing with what some people would call trapped souls and everything like that. So, by the way, the Richard B. Harrison Community Library is celebrating 90 years. So she built it some 90 years ago. It opened its doors on November 12th, 1935, and she passed away back in the 80s and everything like that. But I was just wondering your thing around the notion of being connected to our ancestors, and even sometimes people being trapped and maybe having trapped souls and ghosts in, that's not just in homes, but even in people and in institutions. So I just wanted your take on that.
Since the day I was born, I've always seen energy, moving particles of light within people, around people. My parents would take me, to a party or somewhere, and I would not just see the energy of each person, which, their auric layers, but I'd also see beings, invisible beings, standing around them or floating on top of them. Some would have very bold energy, others would be more wispy type of energies, and that's how I learned how to discern what was more ghost-like and ethereal, or also which was more angelic or guides that do come to us to assist us. I fully acknowledge that there's many veils between realities, and sometimes those veils are thinner, and people do see them. Uh, and Yeah, good for your grandmother. I think that's really awesome what she did. I do believe that she's still present in many ways. Her energy is anchored into you. It's also anchored into the things that she did. And so, in a way, we never really die. We continue. We just change forms, but the energy that is us continues on.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Now, I know you've written a book, and I'd love to hear more about this book called The Angel and the Avatar. And a lot of people, when they think about Avatar, they think about the successful movie franchise and everything like that. So I was just wondering where you came up with this notion of the book and what the book is all about. I'm sure it's not about the movie, 'cause even though that's what a lot of people think about when they think about Avatars, because it was and still is a successful movie series. I think they're on either their third or their fourth installment and everything like that. But I just wondered if you could tell me a little bit about the angel and the avatar and how you came about this book.
Definitely, um, I believe we're all angels,
Hmm.
and this is our avatar.
Okay.
And that we, this avatar allows us, the angelic form that we truly are, to navigate this reality, to hug a tree, to smell the breeze, to play in the ocean, to hug a child. Without this avatar, we wouldn't have an ability to reach out, unless maybe it's somebody that kind of like me that can see energy and communicate to a certain degree, but otherwise, we have no way of being able to participate in this realm. Um, the Angel and the Avatar, the book, is about an angel in heaven and how desperately she desires to have an avatar and everything she has to go through in heaven before she's gifted one. The purpose of my book is it is a teaching, it is a tool, and I
Hmm.
believe that we learn through story better than reading self-help books. I know people who have them piled high in every corner of their house, and they're still looking and searching because even though the information is there and it's valid, uh, how we download it into us and make it part of us differs for each person. So this book, in story form, helps an individual understand their purpose, who they truly are at the base of their being, why they're here, um, how they resonate or vibrate as this angelic form. Um, and I know people who've read it who tell me that when they were reading certain passages in the book, they had something synchronistic happen in their life in the same way as what they were reading. So yeah, I really feel blessed that it was gifted to me. Gifted to me in the sense that uh, the story has been part of me probably most of my life.
Yeah, that makes sense and everything. Now, I know that you've also give you go to your webpage, DoreenMaryBray.com and everything, that you've got this notion of some courses that are there. And some of the courses are for different age ranges and everything like that. And I saw that one of them was for what some people would consider mostly teenagers, even though 12 is actually a preteen year and everything like that. And I know part of the reason that the network was created, meaning Pod TV, is because they felt that there's a lot of things, including fiscal literacy, that are not being taught enough in our school system. So I was just wondering if you could tell us how you came about this, because it's apparently in an online course for young adults who are ready to explore spirituality, not as a belief system, but as a way of living, feeling, and knowing. And like I said, I for one, am one that believes more in the spiritual side than the religious side. Because one of the things that I've talked about on this show before is many years ago, my dad actually brought me to the house because he had heard that there was going to be a documentary, and I think the documentary was on the religions of the world. And they found out that in the religions of the world, and there was a famous anchor, it might have been Peter Jennings or Ted Koppel that was doing this piece and everything, but they found out that the extremes are what we hear about the most, whether it's in Islam or whether it's in Christianity, whether it's in Judaism or Buddhism and everything like that. But those are the extremes. We don't hear enough about the middle ground, where there's a lot more common ground. The principles are very common: respecting Mother Nature, respect your elders, respect your neighbors, things like that. So they're very common themes in all of the religious principles. But then we also get caught up in religious personalities and things along those lines. So I just wanted your take on why a child should take this course and what kind of children you're getting in this course and all along those lines.
I've taught adult education for 40 years. The students, spirituality, mostly energetic anatomy, Chinese medicine, but again, that's energy, right? Um, and most of my students, especially in the beginning, were 50 and over. So what happened in their lives was that they, like most young people, you set off in a course. That course is what your parents tell you should do, you should be, your teachers, your friends, all of the people around you. And you wear all of these layers, these masks, the belief systems that what you should do in order to be okay in the world. And then somewhere, you follow all the rules, and somewhere along the line, you realize you're still not happy. Like you did, the white picket fence, you did all of the things you were told that would make you happy, and you're not. And so this is, I believe, why I got groups that were so more advanced in their age. Eventually, as I expanded that understanding and invited younger people, I remember many classes I had 3 generations in the same class, which is awesome. So it shows that more younger people were open to learning, but also that I was evolving in a way that I could communicate a higher way of understanding life to a younger person.
Yeah, that makes
So the idea is that, if a person starts when they're 12, 13, 14, 15, then they have the potential, number one, of dropping all the programming, finding their authentic self, their authentic voice, not listening to all the, we'll call it junk, crap around them, and moving through life in a way, through authenticity, finding what's truly in their core, in their belief system, why they came to come, why they came here, and their purpose. Uh, to me, that's magical. If any of us could have, in that young age, found our purpose and anchored into it, wow, right?
Yeah, definitely. I hope be a wow moment for anybody and everything like that. Now, the other thing that I know that it is a course that you offer and is more for the younger adults, like from later teenage to young adult years of around 22. And it's I think, misunderstood term because a lot of times it's associated with witchcraft and other parts of history, including some of the ancient Greeks and Romans and people along those lines. But I just want to know what you mean when you say alchemy, because some people when they think about alchemy, they're thinking about turning lead into gold or like turning something that is small or even something that is small into something that is going to give you wealth or something along those lines. But I know that that's not necessarily what you're talking about. But I do think that alchemy is a misunderstood term because a lot of times people associate it with witchcraft and voodoo and other kind of mystical things that are out there. So I just wondering what your definition of alchemy is, and am I correct that many people misunderstand what alchemy is?
You are correct, sort of, because there is alchemy, material type of alchemy, where you can take something like baking soda and you put it through a process, but you can turn it into ormus. It's a alchemical process.
Right.
So that's considered alchemy. You can also take gold and have it go through a similar process that to create ormus. When ormus is the final product, you don't find any gold in it. But if you reverse it, then the gold will reappear. So that's fun. That is a form of alchemy. The type of alchemy I speak about is the alchemy of self. Because if you think of anger, stress, worry, hatred, fear, frustration, that's all heaviness, that's density. For someone like myself who sees, if somebody is really angry or extremely sad, closed in, their field is closed in. Their auric layer is like just dark and against their body, right? So they're heavy, they're dense. That's lead, and that's real lead. And so the transformation is changing that lead, that heaviness, into gold, which in spirituality, gold is the highest frequency that is available without, morphing into actual soul. So they're still in physical form. It might be closer to ascension, higher molecular vibration. But that's the kind of alchemy I teach.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know that one of the other courses you've got for adults of all ages, and many people probably need it, including some of our world leaders and all along those lines, because there's a lot of people that are caught up in the, as you were saying earlier, the fears of the world. There's a lot of people that are even divorcing folks over separate beliefs and everything like that, or having a different belief, whether it's Republican, Democrat, or whether it's conservative, liberal, or whether it's a number of other divisive forces that are out there. But it looks like you have got this course called Soul Ignited, which is wanting us to awaken the powers that we have within. And probably some of those powers are, at least one of those powers, I would think, is the power of empathy and the power to understand people that might be different than you. You might not have to agree with them, but you understand where they're coming from and you're not making judgment on them and everything like that. So I just wanted your take on this notion of awakening the power within and this course called Soul Ignited.
Along the lines of what you were first talking about, that disconnection from family, a belief system that, I'm liberal or I'm this or I'm that, or, even I have cancer. Any kind of disconnect where we label ourselves or we label others is problematic, whether in our time period or any time period, because that creates division. And division weakens us. Right? It's connection that strengthens us. So we live in a world right now that is so disconnected between, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I mean, you name it. People are on their phones nonstop. Right now, I'm on vacation on a beach, and people are walking by in this amazing environment, and they're looking at their phone.
Wow.
And they're either texting or whatever. They don't see the ocean. They don't smell the salt air. They don't hear the birds in the sky. They don't feel the warmth of the sand on their feet. They don't feel the energy coming up from the earth and moving through them. They're totally in this disconnected reality. So I don't even know why they're here, because let's face it, whoever we are at the base of our being, it follows us, right? And up until we're ready to stop and reflect, all wholeness comes from within, from the individual first and foremost. I do hope that that changes. I'm sorry, I lost track of what I was about
Oh,
to
that
say.
makes sense and everything. And you've brought up another interesting point, and I'd love to hear your reflections on that because I do agree that people have become disconnected. I am fortunate that I have met and tried to meet, and when I see them, and have even a brief conversation with my neighbors. I live in an apartment complex. I know one of the neighbors has got Wilbur, her dog, and everything, and I've met even her parents when they came to bring, or I can't remember if they were bringing or taking one of the other dogs that's a family dog back home to where they live at and everything like that. But I will talk to Anna and Wilbur if I see them. There's the Chinese couple that's nearby and a couple of other families that I may know them by name or know them just by face or description and everything like that. But I try to at least say hello to them and everything. But I know a lot of people that have, even in apartment complexes or even in their own intimate environments, and no knowledge of the people in their circle. So it does seem like, particularly during the pandemic, a lot of us became disconnected from other humans and have remained disconnected. I agree that people are on Zoom, they're on StreamYard like we are and everything, but they're not necessarily having face-to-face conversation. I've even seen people go to restaurants, and as you were just saying, with the people at the beach, they'll have everybody on that call will be on an individual phone talking to somebody else and not with the people that they are in the midst of and everything. So I just wanted your take on this disconnect that seems to be existing that could possibly be hurting us as a energetic beings. And as I think I said earlier on the show, I know I've said on other shows, many people consider me to be empathetic and all along those lines. And I think that sometimes us empaths get a bad rap because people are feeling that maybe we're absorbing too much of their energy or talking too much out of school and everything like that. But I think it's just trying to be sympathetic to what people are going through and everything like that. But I just wanted your take on this notion of the disconnects.
Beach example, if I'm walking along the beach in my drama, in my head and my thoughts, I am disconnected from the universe because I have closed off to the universe. Uh, you can tell how disconnected a person is by how fast they walk. You cannot connect to the universe when you're speed walking, because speed walking, unless that's in a sport that you're doing, but if somebody's walking down the street and they're walking really fast, you know they're in their head. They might not see you or anything around them. The speed of their head is going is the speed their feet are going. So this disconnect isn't just from family to family, or because of COVID and everything that happened. This disconnect has been going on for a very long time, but kind of in the background. We haven't really seen it as much as we do now. If you think about 100 years ago, communities supported each other. They, listened to each other. They helped each other. Uh, this type of community doesn't exist anymore, or very rarely does it exist. There's still some places you can go, thankfully, that people actually do spend time, like you, to talk to their neighbors, to get to know them, to offer to assist them if they need help. But again, most importantly, a disconnection from others is also a disconnection from soul.
Yeah, that makes a lot of
Same
sense.
thing. It's the mirror.
Yeah. And you're right about that and everything, Doreen, because one of the things I'm thinking about is when I was in college in the 80s at Marquette and everything along those lines. At that time, I think we were the Warriors. We hadn't become the Golden Eagles yet and everything like that. But I do remember I had a friend who was from one of the, I think his family descents were from either Poland or one of the Eastern European blocs and everything like that. But he used to talk about the Walkman. So we talk about Zoom and everything like that. But he had a nickname for the Walkman when everybody was walking around with a Walkman. I don't even know if people use a Walkman anymore now that we've got phones and everything. But he would call that an example of bourgeois subjectivity. I think I will always remember that phrase because he felt that we were all so much in our head that we were just kind of like walking around in a daze, not paying attention to what else was going on other than whatever was coming in our head, whether that was a coursework, because they might have been listening to a professor or an audio book, or whether you were listening to music. But it was all us kind of absorbing stuff and not even paying attention to the environment around us, which is why I think he coined the phrase bourgeois subjectivity and everything like that. I'm sure other people used the phrase too, including some academics, but I do remember that particular long time ago friend, and I don't even know if he's still living or anything, or if he's still around, but I do, that phrase still sticks with me, even though he used that phrase back in like 81, 82, and we're now in 2025. So I just wanted to, that's to your point that this has been going on for a while and everything like that. And even in that same space, my dad is a visual artist, and one of the pieces that he did is some people would call it a revolutionary piece, or like not so much a protest piece, but it's not sure. It's art that's used to make a statement. So he did a piece that he was called. It was basically about thoughts and prayers, and that's literally what the piece was. I think it was the pull down thing that you get if you're in a fire situation, and all along those lines. So he put in the words thoughts and prayers because his thesis or his idea within the artwork was that too often when we see people in disasters, we give them thoughts and prayers, but we don't always think about that sometimes they need action behind those thoughts and prayers. Nothing wrong with praying to a higher being and hoping that they will intervene or help, but sometimes they also need more than thoughts and prayers. They sometimes need an actual action. And I think that he did that piece around the time that Katrina was going on and some of the other disasters were going on. So the notion is that sometimes people need more than just the thoughts and prayers. They need sometimes you to do something. So I was just wondering your take on that. Do we sometimes not do enough outreach in terms of helping people?
I lived in a small town for about 10 years, small, really small, like one little grocery store,
Right.
one tiny hardware, that was about it, and a house caught on fire. And all the townspeople from all the farmlands around all ran to help to pull things out of the fire. When it was all over, everything was pretty well destroyed. The 5 children family. People brought clothes for them. They offered them shelter. They helped rebuild everything, did donations to pay for some of the things they needed replacing in the home once it was built. That's community. That's so important. So yeah, it's not just prayers. Prayers are great. There's nothing wrong with them.
Right.
but action is a very big part of it. And that's, what the Bible teaches. Not that I'm, I'm church-going person, but I do understand that there are things in the Bible that are true, and one of them is that your neighbor is important. It's part of who you are. That's your mirror. If you're a good person, normally they're a good person back, and we share what we are in action and words and thought and prayer.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'm glad you put it that way and everything like that in that space. I just wondering, where did you grow up in rural in rural America and everything? Because I also grew up because I was going between various small and decent sized cities like Greensboro and Raleigh and Durham and everything. But in my, think I moved when I was like about in the fifth grade, so preteen years up through my teenage years. I lived in Warrenton, North Carolina, and I remember a gentleman, Mr. Lanier, that owned the hardware store and everything like that. But he was also an avid bicyclist. I think he bicycled throughout the country. I know that one time he bicycled all the way down to Florida, and I think one time he might have even bicycled cross country and everything like that. But I still have vivid memories of him, even though I am sure he has passed on and everything like that. But I was just wondering how much of that connection do we have to people that aren't even related to us, but they leave a part of us in our existence. Like you said, as you're hearing, I have the memories of him. That's like I have memories of some of my coaches because I ran track, even though I was one of the worst track runners probably in history and everything like that. But I do have memories of some of the people that were in my life and some that have gone on, like my friend Jimmy Robinson, who passed some decades ago and everything like that. So how much are we connected to these people, and how much of that and is it easier to connect with them in rural environments?
That's a good question. It's known that a soul goes through a process after it leaves the body. It goes through a process of remembering its life, its challenges, its love. After that process, if a person's has been a good person in life, then they move on, you could say, towards the light. Uh, Vocabulary is hard when you talk about invisible realms. If they instead were, say, a mass murderer, for example, they would be in their own living hell. An example would be that they are in a self imposed prison where the people they killed are lying there and maggots are, worms are eating them up, maggots are, going through them, and they would relive and relive and relive until they finally reach the place of asking for forgiveness and repent. Right? Each soul, depending on their life journey, goes through a different space-time reality. Uh, if a person has unresolved issues. Example, a mother that passes away and her kids are young. That's unresolved stuff going on where, the mother is worried before she dies about her children. Are they going to be okay? Are they going to be protected? Maybe they don't have a dad to help them. So now her energy is going to be bound to the children's until she feels that she can release them, that they're okay. So each individual goes through their processes again, depending on their life story, who they are or have been. The cleanest escape, you could say, would be somebody who has lived well, feels that whoever they leave behind are okay. They'll figure it out. They did good. They feel they did good. They did the best they could, and then they will go on and I'll read the book and you'll find out what happens.
No, that makes a lot of sense and everything. But I've had the pleasure of having a couple of people on this show, not a lot, but a couple that have had what would be considered past life experiences, including some that at least 2 or 3 that I can remember that claimed that they had made it to heaven's gates and had experienced what heaven would be like and all along those lines. Now, whether they have or they haven't, that is up to debate depending on how people believe in their own system and everything like that. But I was just wondering, there is this notion that people have that certain people will never make it to heaven's gates, no matter what they do in life, even if they were to go, if you believe in reincarnation, through several incarnations of themselves and everything. Like, I know that there are some people that would be surprised if they got to heaven's gates if they saw Jack the Ripper or Idi Amin or Hitler on those gates and everything like that. Now, having not made that trip, I'm thinking that they're probably not there because they were known to have led those three individuals horrible lives and everything like that. But you've also got people that are thinking that it's their way or the highway in terms of religion and everything like that. So they would also be surprised if they saw, even though this one I think probably is there, but they would be surprised if they saw Mother Teresa if they are of the belief that only a certain type of Christian will get there and everything like that. But I'm thinking that in the bigger picture, the man above, the woman above, if you want to believe that God is of feminine nature and everything, will be looking at the entire um book, if I can use that book of life kind of narrative and everything. We're looking at everything you've done, because we all done good and bad in our lives and everything like that. So they're probably going to be looking at the entire narrative. And if you believe in reincarnation, they're going to be looking at the multiple chapters, because this is only one chapter, and the next life or the past life would be another chapter. So I was just wondering your take on that and your thoughts around that as a visionary teacher and somebody that considers himself a naturopath and a teacher and everything like that. And I don't know if you ever thought that you've gone on those journeys, but I have heard people that have been on my show that have claimed that they have been there. And one person even said that they saw, if I remember their description, they said that they saw just about all the religions up there, but they were almost like in different neighborhoods, but they were all up there. They were just in different places and everything. But that's what they visualized in their version.
Yeah, you could say that each religion is a different frequency, because the person holds different thought forms around that religion, and those different frequencies would exist in a different realm. Yeah. So I used to own a school where I taught energetic anatomy, as I mentioned before. My students, some of them were with me up to 10 years. My students would start off classes having trouble meditating, staying still, being inwardly quiet, especially during a meditation. The meditation could be 10 or 15 minutes. It was usually at the end of class. And they might be present for maybe, one quarter of it if they were lucky. And when they came back, they'd say, "Oh my God, that was so long, I couldn't focus." Right? But then my students that are 5, 6, 7 years into meditation and study, now they would come back from meditation and say, "Doreen, that was like 5 minutes, but really it was an hour," right? Because you enter a realm of no time. There was 3 separate occasions when, so I'll explain. A teacher, their energy should be here, and the student's energy is here. And as the student's vibrations lift, the teacher's energies also have to lift. So this is what's going on. The teacher is bringing the students into higher and higher frequency. Well, as you're aware, reality, we understand reality vibrates at this very thin stream. That's where our consciousness lies. But consciousness is this, right? So there was a few different occasions where I bumped outside of this realm and entered this one by mistake. It wasn't purposeful. So 1 minute I'm in the classroom, I'm giving the meditation, they're following along. I've always did guided meditations. And the next moment, I'm starting to feel really weird, like my cells are sparkling and farther apart. And I'm kind of looking at myself going, "Whoa, what's going on?" And the next second, I traveling like a trillion miles an hour, just shh, and then and boom. So one time I ended up in the body of a Jewish man.
Mm-hmm.
Had a kappa and a long, long beard, sitting around a round table with other Jewish men. And I was speaking Hebrew, which I don't know. And they were all listening and nodding. Um, and then I remember thinking, maybe 20 minutes in, I forgot something. I'm supposed to be somewhere else. And then I realized I left my classroom and I felt I abandoned them. And so I said, "Well, where are they?" So what I learned is that, remember the game Battleships, where everything is on this grid, and you would
Mm-hmm.
try to, put a pin in where that battleship was. Well, reality is like those grids, and I needed to find where I came from. I needed to find where that point was in reality because I saw reality, all these bubble realities all around me, and I said, how do I return to that one spot, that one place, that classroom where my students are sitting waiting for me? I would suspect. So I remember thinking, okay, what did the classroom smell like, feel like, sound like, taste like? What was the essence, that whole package? And the minute I put the whole thing together, I was traveling a trillion miles an hour again and then plop back in the seat in the classroom. And for the students, they're in the meditation, and then after a while, they don't hear me speak, so they open their eyes. They go, "Where's Doreen?" They start walking around the classroom. I'm not there. I teletransported myself, my molecular structure actually shifted, and I disappeared from the classroom. And then for them, they're walking around looking for me, and the next moment, well, 20 minutes later, boom, I reappear in the chair in front of them. Does that
Wow.
answer your question?
That does somewhat answer the question, and that's I'm wondering their reaction to that and everything like that, because I'm thinking that they were sitting there going like, "Well, where did she come from, and how did she get out from nowhere to somewhere?" Because just along those same lines, and I was wondering your thoughts around this. Is I have been one, like I said, that tries to be in tune with my spiritual side. And even a long time ago, I remember having a deja vu moment. Is when I was a teenager and went to a journalism camp, and I felt that I had met everybody in that camp before I actually met them. So I'd had a dream and knew all of the people that were in the camp. And I think it was maybe, it wasn't a big crowd. It was maybe somewhere between 8 to 10 of us and everything like that. One from Georgia, a couple from the Virginia, Maryland area, and all along those lines. And I think there were a couple from North Carolina, but it was maybe 8 to 10 of us. And like I said, I had had a dream about them and felt that I knew them even before I physically met them. And that was in my high school years and everything like that. And in that same space, I have had unease at times, and I am one of those people. Some people will say that it's hocus pocus. Some people say that it makes sense, and it's kind of like what you were talking about, the nature of being in tune with your spiritual side. But there have been times that I have felt unease, and maybe I'll look at like some pennies or a salt shaker and move the shaker and feel that that is helping me to relieve whatever that unease was. And usually it works, at least it works for me. Now that might just be me doing something simple and changing the face of what I was scaring me, and just that simple action caused me to feel relief. And it might be that moving the salt shaker didn't do nothing, but to me it was comforting, and it helped me feel less threatened if there was something uneasy about whatever the situation was.
So that's using your power because that beach idea again. If you're walking along the beach and you're in your problems in your mind, you're not light. You are heavy and dark. Whereas if instead you focused on deep breaths, you listened to the ocean, you purposely, consciously looked, smelt, felt, heard the environment you're in. Now you are opening yourself up to that's an amazing power. Now that's where healing comes from. So what you did is you opened yourself up to the possibility that that would change you, and so it did.
Mhm. Yeah, but definitely change the environment, and whatever the threat was did not feel like a threat anymore. It might not have been that I was thinking somebody was going to knock on the door. That could have been a threat or something that would be problematic and everything like that. Like I also listened very much. I mentioned that the Heritage Center is a historical building and everything. And sometimes I will be in late night meetings, and sometimes I'll get a feeling that maybe I need to leave by a certain time and everything. Not that I'm going to cause any interference or anything like that, but I don't know your beliefs, but I do sometimes think that some of those ghostly spirits, they're like anybody else. They like to have their private time. So sometimes I get this message that, you might want to leave before, like, say, 9 p.m. or 10 p.m., because we might want to have this building to ourselves for a while so that we can dance around and not be noticed. Because I've told you that people have heard mysterious noises at relative times, but sometimes maybe they want the space to themselves. At least that's my belief system and everything. Now, some people may think that that sounds hocus pocus, but that's the way I felt sometimes. It's like, they are allowing us to share their house to preserve their history, but also preserve the history of the building and other things. And sometimes you just feel like, hey, they need their time as well. So is that a mistake on my part, or am I correct in thinking that sometimes the spirits are like us in our own home? Sometimes we want, because I know sometimes when I visit my dad, who is very much alive, sometimes you get the feeling that he's ready for you to leave and he's had enough of your company and everything like that. Not that he is insulting me or telling me to kicking me out of the house, but he's just ready to have some downtime, or maybe some downtime with his lady love and everything like that. So I'm thinking that spirits are the same. Sometimes they might give you a signal that we're ready to have our own party.
Spirits are conscious beings, just as we're conscious beings. What you're doing is you're following your intuition, your guidance. That is a power that most people don't listen to. And so good for you that you do. As you know, everything is particles in motion, vibrations. Uh, Everything is a vibration. Nothing is solid as we think it is. So those spirits at certain times, because how the planets align, everything in our environment shifts. And there are times when the particles may be thicker or denser in your home, which would be more comfortable to you. And then there'll be times when certain planets or stars align that it's more comfortable for them to be in that space and more uncomfortable for you. And so you're being aware, that's conscious attention. So that's awesome.
Yep, that's what I try to do, is have that conscious attention and everything like that. Now, I was having a conversation earlier today. I mentioned Dad, and his current lady is Taurus, I believe, and he doesn't really follow the astrology and everything, and I don't really follow it. I do think that a lot of the traits are common and everything, but I know that two cancers can be very different, because I am in the Cancer sign, and I have a friend that is a fellow Cancer, and he is very much of a lack of a better term, and I don't think that he would deny it, because he's got multiple kids by multiple ladies that he's been involved with and everything. So some people would consider him to be a quote unquote womanizer and everything like that. I am more subdued and have had my own dating issues, don't have any kids of my own, and haven't really had that many long-standing relationships. So we are both of the same sign, but vastly different, is what I'm trying to point out and everything like that. And Dad is a Gemini, and his first wife, my mother, was a Gemini as well. So they were both Geminis, but his latest lady love is a Taurus and everything like that. And some people might be like the bull and the twin getting along, but they're one of the best couples I've ever seen. And part of it is that they respect each other's space. They live separately, but respect each other's space and respect each other's art forms, because she is a dancer and he is a artist in both photography and other art forms as well and everything. But I just wondered, is that something that people should pay attention to? Because I know some people will pick up their newspaper, their daily newspaper, and go to the astrology signals and everything like that, even though a lot of times those are just simple traits and everything. And I do find that a lot of those simple traits are, for the most part, good matches. Like, I know a lot of people think that Cancers are great cooks, and I'm a Cancer, and I can follow instructions for microwave, but I wouldn't call myself a great cook. Like my brother, who I taught to cook when I taught him to read the book when he was, because he's 7 years younger than me. So he was probably about 5 or 6 and I was probably 13. And he handed me the book and said, read it to me. And so he, even to this day, is a pretty good cook. But I was wondering, in terms of astrology, is that something that you are a believer in, or as a spiritual teacher, or is it something that is nonsensical?
12 signs for almost 9 billion people. Yeah. So I do believe that it does have some validity. There's no doubt about it. But there's also a uniqueness that each individual carries, a uniqueness of their soul imprint, which has nothing to do with planetary, because planetary is physical, right? Whereas your soul is, well, I know for a fact I've had thousands of lives, not just in a human form, which means, each life I've had, I was born under a different zodiac. Right? I wasn't always born under the same one. But so the soul is the real part of us that is never changing. It adds on by, each lifetime, understanding more of reality, seeing life through different eyes, different perspectives, different realities. As you know, a bee doesn't see the same, it's all ultraviolet, it doesn't see the same way we do. I remember one time I was sitting at a stream in meditation, and all of a sudden I felt like someone was watching me, and that's not a nice feeling. So I remember jumping up and looking, and surrounded by woods. There was nobody around. I look everywhere, don't see anyone, go back into meditation, but this was really strong. Somebody's watching me. So I get up again, I'm looking like, who, what, where? And sit back down, nobody's there. And then when I was sitting there about to go back into meditation, I noticed below me there was a frog. It was sitting on a rock and it was looking up at me. And I went, whoa, that was what was watching me, the frog. So I thought, I wonder how, because it's staring at me, and I thought, I wonder how it perceives me. I had no idea. And so I shifted that's shamanism, I shifted my consciousness into the form of this form. And the next thing I know, I'm the frog looking back at me. And all I saw was colors moving, sparkling. Oh my God, it was, and I was looking at me going, the same as the frog.
Wow, that's amazing and everything. What is something you mentioned seeing yourself as in a past life as a tree, and now you're saying in a current life as a frog and everything like that? What is something that you have seen, because you said thousands of lives and everything, that has surprised you, and what is something that you learned in that process that caught you off guard? Because I'm thinking if you're able to have that kind of tune in into the nature and into what's going around you, that it would surprise you some of the things that you may find out. Because I mean, there are animals, I mentioned some of them, that definitely people as a general rule don't like them because they are considered vermin or considered nuisances. But I'm thinking that if you're able to come back and live in that space, even if it's only for a brief second, because flies don't live that long and everything, or if you come back as a rat, or you come back as something else that is seen as a bad animal, if you can use that term, even though I think all animals have their own uniqueness and everything like that. But what is something that has surprised you when you've gone through this process?
Evolution, conscious shifting, changes. I remember when I was a kid writing a poem, it was about being a fly. You mentioned the fly.
Right.
And in the poem, I'm paraphrasing, it said something like, oh, I'm a fly, I'm flying. Yay, I love buzzing around, I'm a fly. And then swat. Oh, now I'm a bird, I'm flying around. And oh, a cat caught me. Oops, now I'm, and I always understood that, we're just changing forms, and each form we change perceptions. Nothing is greater or lesser than, it's all in a way, in a different way of thinking of it. We all wear the faces of God. It's just in different forms, seeing reality through these different windows.
Yeah, and you say that, and I was just curious because I have become a fan, and I mentioned it on this show and other shows, of a certain podcast. It's on YouTube. I think it's on other places as well, and you can definitely tell that it's humans playing the roles and everything like that. But it is the cat podcast, and I think the other one is called the dog podcast. But it is basically them giving voice to what we think the cats and the dogs are thinking. And some of them sound very accurate, because in some ways they're thinking that the cat is basically, and I mentioned it earlier, of the notion that the humans are their servants, whereas the cat is, whereas the dog is being the obedient companion and everything like that. And that is the typical stereotype. And I have definitely liked both dogs and cats, and have had both of them in my life, even though I don't currently have any animals, even though I did cat sit maybe about a year and a half ago and everything like that. But I was just wondering your take on some of these stereotypes. It was interesting where they were talking about some of the things that they did even to aggravate humans. So I think in one of the podcasts, the cat was talking about how they will intentionally knock over a dish just to watch the human's reaction. And another one, there was the cat that was not being all that great of a hunter of the mouse that was in the video as well, because they were having too much fun laughing at the human trying to catch the rat with a broom and everything like that. So they were making fun of the human and its hunting abilities, for lack of a better term, and everything like that. So I just wondered your take on these, because that's become part of the podcast and the people using the internet even for frivolous activities, or what people might consider just fun activities, to watch what people's thoughts are of the different animals. Like, I'm a big fan of otters and everything like that. A friend of mine actually wrote a book about my fixation with authors. Well, actually, I guess they're more of an acquaintance, but they used to be a friend, but I've lost track with them and everything like that. But I just wanted your take on our fixations with animals, and are some of these fixations and stereotypes correct?
I sometimes wonder if people who have fixations over certain animals, um, the reason they're so attracted to them is because they have been that animal in one of their lives, and so they understand that animal at a cellular deep way. Uh, Animals communicate, and sure, they laugh at people. I have no doubt. I don't know the program you're talking but somebody else has mentioned it to me, so I know of its existence. I suppose they are animal communicators, and really they see those expressions and understand that the animal is communicating, and therefore portraying it in these videos. Uh,
It's
Animals
interesting.
are wise.
It's interesting you say that, Doreen, because I had an unusual pet, and it was given to me by a friend that was going to theater. They were going to work in New York as a theater tech, if I remember correctly, and I can't remember the young lady's name, but we had worked on some projects. She had worked in the Arts Council with me when I worked at the Arts Council, and she gave me three geckos. They were ironically named after um, different Italian dishes. So I think I had fettuccine Alfredo and linguine. I think those are the three that I had, and everything like that, and all along those lines. And I took care of them as best I could. I'm not saying I'm the best pet keeper or even plant keeper and everything like that, because I know I can do better in terms of knowing when to feed them and all along those lines. But they lived for at least a little bit with me and everything. But as we know, that gecko commercial has been around forever, and I sometimes have joked that I felt that they were looking at that commercial because their terrarium was near the kitchen sink and the TV was closer to my bedroom, which is in the back of a loft apartment. So I'm sure that they could, and like you said earlier, they were probably just seeing colors. But in my mind, I'm going like, they're, if nothing else, they're hearing people talk about the gecko, and everything like that. So they're probably thinking, why is Cousin Ed on the TV and everything like that? So that was my running joke, was that they were probably wondering why Cousin Ed was even on the TV and got the TV series, whereas they did not. Just like I'm sure that Wilbur, who somewhat looks like Lassie, is probably wondering why he hasn't got his TV contract if his uh, lady that is keeping him with, or they're sharing space together, is watching that show, even though that's an older show. And Anna, the owner of Wilbur, if you want to use that term, is in her 20s, so she probably doesn't even know what a lassie is and everything like that. But I'm just thinking that they might see things on TV or hear things on TV that are related to them, that they are sometimes wondering in their own way why those people have fame and they don't.
I do know that people have dogs that watch TV, and sometimes cats watch TV. I had a cat in the past that we used to go and, hit the TV, like if there was something on that it was interested in, like a mouse, or so they do perceive the screen. I don't think they see it the same way that we do, but everything is frequencies at its base, and perhaps your geckos were recognizing the frequency of the gecko that was on the TV, and that's what was attracting them to it.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, that maybe they were attracted that way. Now, I know one of the reasons I found out about you was through RTIR. Like, I use different sources, whether it's podcast guests or ITIR or Matchmakers FM. But I know one thing that you talked about quite often, and it was a subject quite often in your books, and we've kind of touched on it in this show and everything, is we've got a couple of shows on the network that talk about the mental health crisis. I know that there's a show on our network called Where is the Love? And it talks about bullying and how bullying is at an epidemic crisis and everything. But you're actually saying that what we're facing isn't a mental health crisis, it's a soul crisis. So I was wondering if you could tell us what the soul crisis is and how you are defining the soul crisis, or what you mean by that, and how that's different from burnout. Because we always hear people talk about burnout in jobs and burnout in relationships and a number of other things like that. But it seems like you are saying that there is something deeper in play, and you've been kind of alluded to that during this hour conversation. But I was wondering if you could go further more into what you mean.
Think of these poor kids. Everything is about productivity, produce, do, push, which is all brain activity, as opposed to their authenticity. Who are they at the base of their being? Is this the path they really want to be on? Um, what ends up happening is those kids ultimately, if they continue to be pushed, or their belief system is somehow um, move toward negativity. They feel bad about themselves and the world, and they don't feel they're good enough. They don't feel they can accomplish what their parents want them to accomplish, and on and on. That leads to depression, anxiety, stress. I think even bipolar. There's all kinds of diseases because that's dis-ease, a dis-ease with oneself. To me, depression is I'm upset with myself.
Mhm.
Right? And what would make me upset with myself if I didn't feel I was fulfilling what I'm supposed to fulfill? That I'm doing things that are against my nature, that I'm being pushed into a belief system that doesn't resonate with who I am. So, in that sense, it is a soul crisis because we are ignoring that connection to our soul, that part of us that whispers quietly, which we call guidance, intuition, inspiration. That's the soul speaking to us. Unfortunately, it is a very quiet voice, and we have to be in silence in order to hear it. And in our world today, there's not much silence.
Yeah, there's not a lot of sounds in our world today, unfortunately, and everything like that. But in that same space and everything, one of the topics that we talk about quite often on this show, I think you're going to have the Churty next week will be bringing it up as well, because it's a topic that comes up quite often, partially because it's a thing that I think is too often ignored, and we all have different answers to it and everything. But you're kind of alluded to it. A lot of people are afraid to tackle what their true mission is in life and everything like that. And I know a lot of people talk about what some people would call the imposter syndrome, or this belief that you're not as good as you think you are, or as you should be, and everything like that. So I just wanted your take on that, because I know that there have been, even in my own life, jobs, and I am still in, even at the late ages of 60, in the single space. So I know there have been relationships that I have not pursued and jobs that I have not pursued, because I've had that whole inner dialogue conversation where you find reasons to talk yourself out of the pursuit of the relationship or the pursuit of the job. And by the time you decide to pursue it, the opportunity has gone, whether that was in a relationship or a job, because, and I have definitely been in both of those situations. So how did we get past this inner critic? Because a lot of times we are too, while we are not listening the way you're describing, we also sometimes are too often in our heads and talking ourselves out of things. So I was wondering, how do you get past that even in your own life? I'm sure there were people that probably told you not to do these courses and not to write this book and everything like that, and you had to get them out of your head and maybe even get yourself out of your own head. So how do you deal with that inner critic?
From the time a baby is in the womb, a fetus is in the womb, it's already being programmed. Daddy is always already saying, "Oh, you're going to be a lawyer like your daddy and your granddaddy." So the programming starts really early. Usually, by the time a child is 7, they have already adopted all the patterns and habits that they will have the rest of their lives. Those stories then morph into their belief system. But when we listen to what we're telling ourselves, you will be able to identify that that's the voice of your dad, or that's the voice of your mom. It may not be in their voice, but that's what they said. You're not good enough, you're not smart enough, you're not tall enough, you're not fat enough, you're not skinny enough, you're not right. Those stories, and those stories play out over and over again.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense and everything. But even in that sense, I'm sometimes surprised and everything. I've got no kids of my own, as I referenced and everything, but I do have two nephews, and they are now at that age where they are looking at schools. One of them has already gotten an acceptance letter to one of our HBCUs here in the area, and is waiting to hear from 5 or 6 other colleges, mostly in the state of North Carolina. But he is interested in going into a field that I am still trying to figure out where the interest came from. So to that point that you were saying, um, none of us, meaning his grandmother, was in teaching and in foundation work, working at a major uh, philanthropic organization, the Golden Leaf Foundation, and everything like that. His dad has been a professor and an artist and everything like that. And as far as I know, I can't think of any of my brothers friend circle that are lawyers or politicians, but apparently he's interested in being a lawyer or a politician, even though I may do some activism work, but I wouldn't call myself a politician, definitely not a lawyer and everything. So I'm totally confused as to your point where Julius got this idea to be a lawyer, because I can't think of any lawyers in our family. I go back to my grandparents and everything like that. Whereas I get where his brother wants to be an engineer, because one of his good friends is my brother's girlfriend's son, because they're doing that blended family thing, and he's an engineer already, and they are kind of attached to each other, even though it's that blended family. So they're not really brothers, but they're kind of like brothers and everything like that, and they are very attached to each other. So I can see the connection of the engineer, and Malik's, my brother's girlfriend, is an engineer, so I can see the engineer interest. But I'm still mystified as to where my nephew Julius is getting the idea to be a lawyer and a politician. But maybe they're having conversations that I don't know about.
Well, the thing is, you're looking only at the physical reality of a human being. You're not looking at the soul that has birthed itself hundreds, maybe thousands of times on this planet, that comes in with its own idea of its purpose, its calling, and why it came. So we are multidimensional, and not just the programs. And I do believe that those that are able to break free from the programs, in other words, regardless of how little any of your parents tried to make you feel, you still rose up and became great. Because within the mechanism of your soul, there's a higher drive. You're an older, an ancient soul, so you have more of a history of planetary life, where you forego all of that conditioning. Yes, it might still ring in your ears here and there. Don't get me wrong, especially during disappointments, times where you've been let down either by a relationship or work, but ultimately that person picks himself up again and says, okay, that was terrible. That was crap, maybe even. It's not what I want to repeat. I hope to never live it again. But regardless, I'm standing up, I'm brushing myself off, and I'm moving forward again.
That makes sense and everything like that. I'm just wondering, how much do you think it is important for parents and even grandparents? The one thing that I will praise my dad for, probably praise him until I'm no longer here on the planet and everything like that, is that at a very young age, those nephews that are now 16 and 17, my dad was showing them around and showing them nature, because he is a big fan of nature. So he was showing them trees, he was showing them plants, he was even showing them plants that you may not even recognize and everything like that, because they're very insects and stuff that are small to the ground. But he was showing them that when they were almost like a little bit past their infant years and everything like that. And I'm sure that there are some people that are into early education. It would be like that's much too early for them to be introduced to those ideas, because I think they say the brain isn't fully developed until you're like, I won't say 7, or I know it varies from man to woman and everything like that. But there were some people that would probably argue that that's too early to introduce people to what some people might consider complex ideas. But I don't believe that, and I know my dad doesn't believe that either. So he was introducing them to ideas at a very early age, and definitely getting them in tune with nature and everything like that. So I was just wondering your thoughts around that, because I do know that there is some philosophies that don't really bring the complex issues until a certain age. But even when I looked at your courses, I'm seeing some of your courses you're teaching about spirituality at like age 6 and everything. So definitely you don't seem to have that belief system either. But I just wondering, you're taught when folks are thinking that you can't bring people to understand the greater nature of the universe until they are of a certain age.
I have a graduate student who has a business where she teaches kids 4 years old about spirituality. So it is doable. It's not my forte, but there are people who are focusing in that area, and those kids have really developed in a beautiful way. For your grandfather, I think it's wonderful that he introduced those children to nature. We are nature ourselves, so I think that should start from the time the child's out of the womb.
It was actually my father, their grandfather. So I don't know if you heard it
Okay,
correctly, but yeah, it was my father, their grandfather.
okay. But that's great that he did that. My goodness, I wish everyone did. So many kids in the city have no idea about nature. They're so disconnected. It's almost scary.
Yeah, we're disconnected and even disconnected from things that people are considering junk. 'Cause the other thing that my dad does is he has looked at like some of the old rail nails and some of the old rail items, and he's actually made that some of his artwork and everything like that. So he's definitely incorporated animals like insects into his artwork, but he's also incorporated what some people would consider like found art, like some of the old rails from the railroad tracks and some other things into art and everything like that. So I think that sometimes we don't just ignore nature, but we even ignore some of the things that we have created that are out there as well, because we just kind of like don't think about the intricacies of them or what was going on even in the making of them and everything. We just kind of like take it for uh granted that they were created, but not thinking about the people that were behind them and even how they have impacted us. Because I have friends that are fascinated by old railways. I remember a friend at one of my other jobs that had a fascination, and ironically, I think he was in the autism spectrum and everything, but he had a fascination with the railways and everything like that. And I know other people that have been fascinated even by the ways that railways seem to disappear, but they don't really disappear. Like even here in Durham, where I'm at, there are railway tracks that exist underneath the ground, but the city went from being a rail town to being a small city. So the rail tracks exist, and people are sometimes fascinated when they find where the tracks were and where they existed, and even some of the wildlife that has moved into those tracks and everything. And now they're trying to figure out whether they can recreate, if we ever get light rail, whether those tracks can ever be reused and everything. So sometimes even in buildings you can reuse them, because I know a lot of buildings here in Durham have been reused. It used to be one thing and now they're another thing, whether it's a apartment complex that used to be an old tobacco warehouse or something like that. So I just wondered, do you think that we don't pay enough attention to um, our creations as well, not just Mother Nature, but also our own individual creations?
Everybody is certainly different, and there are people who look into pyramids and structures that are way older than the pyramids, and others walk right by and couldn't care more or less.
Right.
So I think it's very diverse, just like the amount of people and their belief systems and religions are very diverse. I couldn't say that it's definitely one way or another.
Yeah.
Those railway tracks in some countries, they refurbish them. I guess you could say they make them into walking trails
Right.
or biking trails, which is amazing because these railway tracks pass through mountain ranges and everywhere. So there's magic there, just waiting to be explored and developed.
You mentioned that a couple of times, and I wonder your thoughts because you are a world traveler in addition to your spiritual journeys and everything like that. But do you think that we do a good enough job in trying to understand? Because part of the creation and the reason for the creation of Pod TV was that they had friends that were other parts of the world, and they didn't feel that we were getting enough of their story and their opinion of the pandemic and everything like that. So I know that there's a gentleman that comes in from Bangladesh regularly. There's a gentleman that comes in from Canada. We used to have a gentleman that came in regularly from Australia, and even people from New Zealand that aren't on the network anymore, or Scotland, and they would oftentimes give us that information, because not everybody can afford. I mean, you wish everybody could afford to travel to other parts of the world, but let's be realistic. Not everybody has those kind of resources and everything. So it is sometimes good to get a different perspective. So do you think, in your mind, as one that has traveled the world, that we've done enough good job of understanding people from the various parts of the world? Because this is a big universe that we live in with those billions of people that you were talking about earlier.
People don't even really understand their family members or their neighbors.
Right.
So how can they understand another culture which is completely different from what they understand? They eat differently, they pray differently, their whole system is different. Example, where I live in Canada, by the way. Where I live, I know every herb. I can go into the woods and even if there's no leaves on the trees, tell you what type of tree they are. I know how to use the bark to make medicine in the summer, their leaves, how to make medicine. I know every wild plant and how to use it either as a medicine or to weave it into clothes. So that environment to me is very comfortable. I have the knowledge of it. But when I went to Belize, I went into the jungles and I knew nothing. I didn't know the insects, the reptiles, the right, the culture, the trees, the plants. I knew nothing. So yeah, everything on this planet is different in a beautiful, magical way. And we can take the time to learn, but still, like I said, and most people don't even really know their own parent or their sibling or their neighbor. So I think that we're expanding knowledge-wise, but I believe what's important is to recognize the diversity of plants, nature, people, animals, and honor each perspective, whether it's yours or not.
How important do you think it is? Because I have relatives that claim more of their indigenous side than other sides of their ancestry. I know that me and my brother and my dad and rest of the family claim mostly the African American side of our ancestry, but I do have cousins that are very much into the native side of our family lineage and everything like that. And it does seem like a lot of our First Nation people are more in tune with the soul and the kind of the nature of what's going on with the soul. I know that in the native culture, there's a lot of activities with like sweat lodges and things along those lines. And even in some of the First Nation kind of people in other countries, whether it's the Aborigines in Australia or even some of the early pioneers or early settlers in like the original people in Scotland that are very much in tune to their spiritual side and everything. So I just wondering, do you think that people that are longer history in terms of being civilizations are more in tune with their soul and maybe have less of a soul crisis than those of us that are very much westernized and everything along those lines?
I did sweat lodge ceremonies for 30 years. I only stopped giving them a few years ago. They're a lot of work. But these this experience changes people on an extremely profound level. I'm not native. My grandfather's mother was native, but that's like so removed. And I had people come up to me and say, "Why are you giving a sweat lodge? You're not native. You're not allowed to. You don't understand. How could you say you're a shaman? You're white." You know, uh, the thing is, shamanism, any belief system that connects you to nature, whether we call it shamanism or mysticism, um, it doesn't belong to natives or aboriginals or white people or black people or orange people or green people, whatever. It's a state of being. And that state of being, once embodied, can shift not just the person, but even people in their field or people they touch, people they speak to. So, who holds the ancient wisdom? Those that remain in silence, those that are willing to let go of their ego and all the identification that comes from the programming, the life story, and hold space.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and I can definitely see that and everything like that. But I'm just wondering, the other thing that I know that goes on is that sometimes people are afraid of that they don't understand, and I know that that was part of what went on with the Salem witchcrafts. And I know that even one of the other founders, Kim Calhoun, definitely is proud of some of her um, Wiccan background in her own life and everything like that, because she definitely had some ancestry that is part of that community, and she is proud of that. But she also believes in reclaiming the identity, just like some people want to reclaim that B word that has to do with women, and some people want to reclaim that N word that has to do with black people. I do know some people that like to reclaim the W word and everything like that because it has a certain scandalous kind of background that people try to put on people that are shaman, or in the witching field or witches or all along those lines. So, what do you say to people that are wanting to go against you because of the belief systems and everything like that? Because I do know that sometimes people are very much willing to stick a label on somebody and make it a negative label.
It is problematic for sure. People love labels.
Mhm.
But what happens when you yourself defy all labels?
Right.
It's irrelevant at that point what people call you or what they try to label you. It just flows off of you, I guess, like water off a duck's back. Everybody's allowed to have their opinion, but I don't allow that opinion to affect me.
No, that makes a lot of sense, and that definitely makes sense in that sense and all along those lines. Gary, to wind down, I usually go about an hour and a half, an hour and 45 minutes on all of this. But before we end, what can listeners do to feel calmer and more centered? You definitely talked about that, and I'm definitely one that believes that even going outside just for a brief walk. I was actually walking with a friend of mine yesterday. I was walking from the event that I mentioned earlier to the bus stop, and then they were going the rest of the way to their home and everything like that. But then even talking to that young lady who is very much attached to her connections and everything like that, and to attach to her own spiritual vibes. We were talking about a lot of spiritual things, including astrology and other things on that brief walk. But I noticed sometimes, and she was telling me, I think that she gets up in the morning and goes for a walk in our near the Duke Wall. So if she's walking from her house to the Duke Wall, that's probably a good, I would guess, somewhere between 4 to 5 mile walk that she's taking every morning that helps her ground herself. But I know a lot of people are not going to make that kind of a long walk, even if it's going to help them ground themselves. So what is your thoughts about what people can do to feel calmer and more centered, even if they are stuck in their house for whatever reasons?
Yeah, grounding is a good word. I live in Canada. It's easy to ground in the summer, but not in the winter with big, thick boots on. Because grounding is, true grounding is actually having an electromagnetic current between the earth and the body. And that allows the soul then to be fully present. In other words, most people's soul is not completely present, maybe walking beside them or around them, but not fully embodied. The soul needs to come down past the thought forms first. But if somebody in thought is a soul, it's like you're on the phone and you're talking. That's the brain. And somebody else can't come in to call you because the line's busy. Right. So kind of like that, the soul can't come in because all of this distortion is going on in the head. But let's say you can calm your mind, you can quiet it, and the soul can then come. And it is supposed to come all the way down through the body, through each of the chakras, all the way down to the bottoms of your feet, and then into the earth. That's the channel. Right? So when that channel is open, then you are one with earth, with the universe, with all that is. That's the greatest experience there is. That's called bliss, or even grace, when you become one with everything and everything. Whether it's a blade of grass or a flower or a tree, you are one. You feel what they feel. The energy that moves through them moves through you. That practice. That is a practice, and it takes time, because the first thing is stopping the thoughts. There are techniques. One, catch your brain when it's thinking. It's very problematic if you are somebody who has a lot of things that disturb you. You'll notice that, say something happened at work, somebody said something, or you said something, then you're going home, but you keep thinking, oh, why did they say that? And what if they said this instead? And maybe I should have reacted differently. And so you've got all of this going on and on and on in the head. What I've noticed when my head has rambled, I'll stop, I'll listen, and I go, who am I talking to? Because really, talking to that person that, I had that conversation or didn't have that conversation with, that I thought I should have that, right? And that's it. And then we're repeating that. Oh, maybe I should have said this instead. And right? But there's nobody there yet. In our mind, we are talking to somebody, and it's an ongoing conversation. So the first is catch it, ask the question, who am I talking to? Nobody else there, right? And then that's the realization, the acknowledgement that you're rambling. Dr. Deepak Chopra says we have 96,000 thoughts. 96,000 thoughts a day. That's horrendous when you think about it. But the worst thing is 84 to 94% are the same thoughts. So we're just repeating. But
Yeah.
stop repetition, deep breath. Most people have a shallow breath.
Mhm.
A shallow breath, shallow life. Shallow breath means you're rambling. Deep breath, all the way down as far as you can. You open up all of your chakras, all of your energy fields with your breath. You're breathing almost to a yawn each time.
Okay.
It's so full. That breath calms the mind. It calms the neural pathways begin to make different protons, neutrons spinning at different rates. You're changing everything, your whole molecular structure. Just that alone changes everything. It changes your direction. So energetically, when you're rambling on, your direction is it's a mirror universe. So your direction is going to go in the worst direction possible, the direction of the rambling. So whatever you're rambling, the same is going to be brought back to you. When you take those deep breaths, you're actually switching fields. So you're switching your energy. So what's going to be attracted to you will change. So simple breath. Slow down your walking pace. Again, very simple. When you're walking fast, your head will naturally ramble. So either you catch yourself walking fast and go, oh yeah, okay, I'm rambling. Whoa, slow down. Take some deep breaths. And now I feel peace. Another way, thoughts catch us because they're happening here in the front lobes. And we hold our conscious attention in the frontal lobe. So a thought happens and then whoosh, we're gone. If you bring your attention to the back of the head, there's a place called the seat of the soul. It's above the spinal column and at the base of the skull. We call it a throne. So you snuggle into the throne. You snuggle your conscious attention into the throne and become the observer. The thoughts might still be happening way up here, over here somewhere, but you're just observing. You're no longer being swept along. That in itself displaces your position. So you're no longer the thought having the thought and the thought sweeps you away. Now you have a choice to either engage in the thought or just watch them float by and not participate. What most people don't understand is that we're like a radio. We're receiving signals all the time. Those thoughts may not even be yours. Like somebody once said to me, Doreen, I'm walking along and I'm having a great day, and then boom, all of a sudden I feel like crap. I'm having these bad thoughts, negativity. Why? Well, she was probably, that antenna was probably focused in on whatever was happening. She downloaded that information into her. She acknowledged it as hers. Now we own it, right? We look at it. The moment you look at it and engage with it, now it becomes part of you. So now she identified it as hers, and then it brought her energy down. So as that antenna, as that radio, we can choose what station we listen to. We can stay on the same station all our life and listen to the same blah, 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 or we can change stations, choose to change stations. And that's just by feeling a higher frequency that's somewhere there. We just kind of like turn that dial, right? When that's what you're doing, and tune into a frequency that resonates with you, that makes you feel joy, that makes you feel open, that makes you feel receptive.
No, that makes sense. It's interesting you say that because I've done that with dreams where there have been maybe some nightmares or other types of dreams that I was feeling unease. And I mentioned earlier the things that I've done with salts, but that's during the waking hours. But there have been times where I have felt uneasy at a dream. And if it was an uneasy dream, I have literally done that. I have found myself in a way to change the channel. So if I'm like in the dream, I'm being chased for whatever reasons and I don't feel comfortable with that chase, I'll be like, I don't like this dream. I think I want to change the channel. So I forget, you can do it on the TV, you can do it in your dreams as well. So there have been times that I have forced that conscience in order to change the dream because I wasn't liking which way or the direction that particular dream was going in. But it's like you said, not everybody is in tune or trying to do that. But there have been times that I, for whatever reasons, woken up from the middle of a bad dream, and sometimes you will continue to dream when you go back to sleep and everything. But I've been like, no, I didn't like that dream. I think I want to try a different dream. So it's kind of like what you're saying about changing channels. So definitely, I think that if you are in tune, you can easily, well, not easily, but you can try to change the channel if there are things that are disruptive for whatever reasons.
We have free will. We can change the channel at any time. And, I believe that your dreams were, prophetic in the sense we're teaching you what you could also do in your daily life.
Right. Yeah, because you can definitely learn from what you can do in the daily life as well. And sometimes we don't pay enough attention to what you can do in the daily life. And a lot of people don't pay attention to their dream messages. I know some people that write their dreams down, and I've written a few of them down when I remember to do that and everything. But a lot of times, unfortunately, we get caught up in the drama of life and the run of meal of day-to-day life. So sometimes you forget the dreams until later, or you may remember a synopsis of the dream. Because I know there are times I've written down dreams after a while, but it was not the full dream. It might have only been a synopsis of what I remembered. Whereas if I've done it immediately after I got up or shortly after I got up, it was more detailed. And I'm not saying I do that as often as I probably should, but there have been times that I've gotten up and written down either an outline of the dream or the basis of almost the whole chapter or the entirety of the dream and everything like that. But it varies depending on what's going on. Because sometimes if you wake up and then you're getting into your routine of a day, then sometimes the dreams are, the memory of the dream is faded, for lack of a better term.
There's a practice, it's called a dream camera. Before you go to sleep at night, you imagine that you're bringing a camera into your dream world with you. And some people place a physical camera beside their bed, just to remind them. And it usually takes a few nights to keep programming yourself, but eventually what happens is when you're in your dream world, you remember you have a camera with you and you start clicking pictures. And when you wake up, you might not remember your dream, but during the day, something will happen, you'll get triggered, and that snapshot will reveal itself. And then through that snapshot, you remember the whole dream.
Yeah, that makes sense. I could definitely try that. Have a non-working camera, but you didn't say the camera had to be working. But I know a friend of mine gave me a digital camera and it needs a new battery or things like that. But maybe just that camera in and of itself, because right now it's not really serving that much of a purpose other than to create some more junk and clutter in my life. So that might be its purpose, is to go into the dream world and everything. Because like I said, you didn't say it had to be a working camera; it just needed to be a camera and everything along those lines.
It's more like a prop to remind you that that's what you're doing, because you're not actually taking the real camera.
Right. And since the real camera doesn't work, the prop as even a non-functional camera, it can still work, because it's just, as you said, it's just a prop in that sense and everything. So that might see something that I have to try in the not too distant future. Maybe even tonight I'm going to be watching a basketball game, and I don't know what time that game will end, but I might try tonight, or I might try it in the near future and everything like that. But definitely it sounds like some worthwhile advice to follow and everything like that. Like I said, I know we're here to wind down, and I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I hope other people have got some insights into what they can do in their dream world, but also in their life in general, and even breaking those stereotypes. I don't know if you answered that question, but what is your thoughts when people want to conquer those stereotypes before we end the whole thing? Because I do know people that like to reclaim things that have been maybe taken out of context. So a lot of people, when they think of witches and shamans, or however you pronounce it, they think of like the Salem witch trial and things like that, which is the negative aspect. Where I think they said more than half of those people weren't even practicing the craft and everything like that, but they were doing other things that the ruling powers didn't like.
Power is not found by any particular craft, whether it's occultism or witchcraft or whatever you want to call it. Each of these arts are a frequency that some people engage in because they feel that there's power there, like black magic or some other stuff that's going on with our leaders. Even 1%, as you probably realize. there's really no power except for the power of the soul, but we morph it into these different structures, whether it's religious belief system or, like you're saying, witchcraft or whatever. It's all the same energy that we're using, but putting on different hats with it.
Yeah, we put on different hats, and then some people think that they have to be involved in the different practices in order to be successful in everything. Because I mean, there are some people that even to this day believe that there are a number of our world leaders that are practicing negative energy. I mean, I know I had one of those people that is fighting against that, Olga Damagard, I believe is his name, and everything like that. But he definitely had this notion that there are some world leaders that are practicing things in a negative aspect in terms of the spiritual connection. And there might be even some people here in the States, and we won't have to name their names, that might be involved in that. And I know a lot of leaders that are involved in everything from the Masons to other things as well. So there are some people that do feel that there are people that are maybe mistapping their powers.
Yeah, and there is power there. I guess the real question is which power is the greatest power. I believe that there's always been light and dark.
Right.
There's that what we would say is good and bad.
Right.
There's different sides of the coin, and there is power on both sides. Which one is greater? Well, first there was light, and light was all there was. So, light.
Yeah, light is always going to win over darkness, even though it may not seem that way every time. But at least that's my philosophy and belief, is that in the whatever the end is, or whatever the final battles are, usually light will, there, in my belief system, I do believe that light will always win over darkness. But it may not always feel that way, because sometimes it feels like the darkness is winning, whether that's in your personal life or in your world life or in your universal life and everything like that. But I am one of those people, like I said, I've had people that have called me an empath and everything, that believes that in the end light will win. And even now it seems like, it may not seem like it, but the powers of light seem to be gathering strength. At least that's the impression that I'm getting from other people that have empathetic beliefs. So it does seem like there is a shift in a more positive direction, even though with some of the things going on, including the way we're treating each other, it may not always seem like it. But it does seem like there is at least a little bit of a shift, maybe toward a more positive direction. Or maybe I'm just being overly optimistic.
Well, look at it this way. You have a room that's in total darkness, and you bring in a candle, one candle, and it's no longer dark. It doesn't take a lot of light to shift what is darkness, what is negative on our planet. We just need those that carry the candle forward into the darkness.
I agree. That's definitely what we need and everything. But like I said, I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. These shows usually go anywhere from an hour and a half to about an hour and 45 minutes. I always give my guests, and we've done a lot of that in this show. It doesn't always work out this way. But in every show, I give my guests an opportunity to give their message of positivity, their message of hope, or whatever that may be for the universe, and also to share how they can be reached and contacted. And if there's anything that we haven't touched base on that they would like to share with our listener audience. And like I said, Pod TV is a global network, so we have listeners and fans from throughout the world, and it is aired on Amazon Fire, Roku Live, and a number of other sources, including Facebook, Instagram, and a number of other Twitter, and a number of other sources as well. So any message of positivity that you would like to share with our audience, call that my own personal mission, because I've been doing that in this show for about network's about 4 years old. So I think I've been doing it for about 3 or 4 years. And I'd like to have every guest give a message of positivity. To your point, I figure the more light we can shine, the better the world.
Well, just what you said, the more light we can shine, the better the world. We each came with a calling, with a purpose. And of course, some are, covered in fear and worry and concern. So they're their light at this time, but I believe that each person's light is below all the programmings. In other words, it's layers on top of who we really are. And just taking some deep breaths and letting all of that drop to ground, letting it all go, shedding it, will illuminate the light that they are. That is the greatest gift anyone can give themselves in the world. And I pray that in for each person.
That makes sense. If you want to tell folks how you can be reached and contacted if people are interested in your coursework, I did see that there'll be some new courses coming up in 2026, which is next year, but they're not on the website as of yet. But if you want to tell folks how you can be reached and if there's any other message that you want to share. And then last but not least, I'm going to go out because I sometimes have various PSAs. So I'm going to go out with one that I go out with quite often, which is about the power of educators and education, but not just the regular teachers, but also their support staff, whether that's guidance counselors, the janitor, or other people that are involved in the education system. So if you want to speak to the role of education in your own life, that's what we'll close out with.
Okay, you kind of cut in and out during that last part. So, but as far as reaching me, it's my name, DoreenMaryBray.com. So it's easy. Name of my book is The Angel in the Avatar.com. So I'm easy to reach, but I didn't quite get the janitor one.
No, I was just saying that I'm going to play a PSA. It'll be the PSA to get us out of here, but it's a PSA from a gentleman in Oklahoma that is supporting educators and around the worldwide. But he's basically just supporting the power of education and educators. But when he says educators, he doesn't just mean the regular educators. He's also talking about the guidance counselor, the janitor, the resource officer, but everybody that's involved in the education system, because that's who he honors when he makes these awards annually and everything like that. So I just wondered if you could speak to the power of education in your own life.
Education comes in many forms. Somebody can miss university or even college, but be extremely educated through life experiences. Somebody else can have multiple PhDs and yet be really bad at life.
No, I agree with you on that. So before I play this PSA and get us on out of here, many years ago, as part of Brothers with Vision, which was a theater group in the Cultural Arts Center that I worked at that existed for about a year and a half, I wrote a skit. Some people would call it a mini play called Confessions of a Buppy. And that's literally what they said in Confessions of a Buppy. The Buppy was going on the bus, like a city bus and everything like that, and learning about life lessons from various people. So he ran into some homeless people and learned a life lesson from the homeless people. He also learned life lessons from fellow corporate people and everything like that. But one of the things that he learned was he ran into a janitor at his workplace, and the janitor actually knew more about the work environment than he was giving him credit for. So he learned that one of his true mentors was actually the janitor, because as you know, oftentimes the janitors and the secretaries know where the true power lies in the corporation and all along those lines. So that was kind of the point, was that the greatest mentor he had was not one that he was expecting. He was expected to be like a fellow entrepreneur or a fellow business person, but it was actually a quote unquote lowly janitor that was the one that taught him the greatest lesson and everything like that. And that was kind of the theme of that particular sitcom, was that sometimes we learn people from folks that we're not expecting to learn from.
That's beautiful and really well said. Thank you for sharing that.
No problem. And on that note, I'm here to get out of here with this particular video where he was created these awards. I think they're the TAAF awards, if I remember correctly. And then after that, I'll take both of us out. Well, I'll take it off while it's playing, and then I'll hit the end stream. But it's been fun talking to you, and hopefully we'll get you back on another one of these online dinner parties. But I hope that our listeners have learned a lot, and we do re-air these several times during the course of the weekend month. So if they didn't get it this time, they'll get it in the future and all along those lines. But I have thoroughly appreciated you being on, and glad that I found you through RTIR and everything like that. And hopefully we'll get you back on some other shows and maybe even this show as well. But thanks for being a great guest.
Oh, thank you, Mark. I really appreciate your time and your space.
No problem. So right now we're getting ready to get out with this video.
I won't fold, I won't drop until we on top. Only going non-stop. I won't fold, I won't drop until we on top. Only going non-stop.
I want to thank everyone for coming to the 2020 TAF Awards. This was a show like no other, people. This is the Grammys for dignitaries, educators, and support staff around the state of Oklahoma and worldwide. We cannot do this without the support of the people. So we thank you. I thank you for being such a dedicated supporter to this movement for the Teachers Appreciation Foundation. I thank you.
It's non-stop. I won't fall.